Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 13. This is the second part of this chapter which starts the cardiovascular system, and then chapter 14 also is going to continue this discussion. So let's start with the anatomy of the heart. This is the heart. It's composed of two sides, the right side of the heart and left side of the heart. The right side of the heart is filled by unoxygenated blood with less oxygen. The left side of the heart is filled by blood with oxygenated blood. Each side, right or left, has two chambers. One chamber on the top is called atrium, and the chamber at the bottom is called ventricle. So here's a right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. These two chambers are separated by a valve. This valve on the right side is called tricuspid. At the left side is called bicuspid. Another name for bicuspid valve is mitral valve. Blood is going to start from the atrium and is going to come to the ventricle. From the ventricle, blood is going to leave the heart. On the right side, blood is going to get inside the pulmonary trunk, and since this blood doesn't have oxygen, it's going to go to the lung. Lung is going to oxygenate this blood, and blood is going to come back to the left atrium through four vessels. 1, 2, 3, 4. This vessel called pulmonary vein, and pulmonary vein is going to bring blood to the left atrium. From left atrium is going to come to the left ventricle, and you don't see the opening, but there's an opening here for the aorta for this one. So this guy is going to open right here, and blood is going to get inside the aorta. Therefore, we have four chambers, and we have four valves. The valve between right atrium and right ventricle is called tricuspid. The valve between left atrium and left ventricle is called bicuspid. This valve at the beginning of the pulmonary trunk is called pulmonary valve, and the valve that you don't see here at the beginning of the aorta is called aortic valve. After blood is going to get inside the aorta is going to take this blood with oxygen to the rest of your body, everywhere. Your body is going to use this oxygen, and this blood without oxygen is going to come back through these two big veins. It's called inferior vena cava or superior vena cava back to the right atrium, and this cycle is going to continue. These are all anatomy. I know some of you didn't take anatomy, so I'm forced to explain another topic here before we get to the physiology, and that is called cardiac cycle. A cardiac cycle is composed of one contraction and one relaxation. Contraction is called systole, and relaxation is called diastole. To begin this cycle, we're going to start from the time that all four valves are closed. As you can see, your tricuspid valve is closed, your bicuspid valve is closed, pulmonary valve is closed, aortic valve is closed. Blood is going to come inside the atrium and it's going to fill the atrium. You must realize that each chamber has a specific pressure. For instance, if you look at this picture, you can see the right atrium has its own pressure, right ventricle has its own pressure, and left ventricle has its own pressure, and left atrium has its own pressure. With the same token, there's pressure inside the pulmonary artery, and there's a pressure inside the aorta. You don't need to sit down and memorize these pressures, but you need to understand. Every time the pressure of one chamber exceeds the pressure of the other chamber, the valve is going to open. For instance, if the pressure inside the right atrium increases beyond the pressure of right ventricle, this valve is going to open and blood is going to come down. If the pressure of left atrium exceeds the pressure of the left ventricle, this valve is going to open. If the pressure of right ventricle exceeds the pressure of pulmonary artery, this valve is going to open and blood is going to get out. And finally, if the pressure of left ventricle exceeds the pressure of the aorta, this valve is going to open. So the only reason that these valves open is because of changing pressure. So now let's start this cycle when all four valves are closed and blood is coming inside the atrium. Let's take a look at the right side, and left side would be the same thing. So blood is going to come here and it's going to fill this atrium. This is called atrial filling. Blood is going to come more and more. The more you add blood inside this atrium, the pressure inside the atrium is going to go higher and higher. When the pressure inside the right atrium is going to exceed the pressure of the right ventricle, this valve is going to open, just like this. This blood is going to rush inside the ventricle. When the blood comes inside the ventricle, this is called a rapid ventricle filling. So quickly the ventricle is going to get filled with blood. Then your atrium is going to go to contraction to make sure every drop of blood is inside the ventricle. So now we're going to have atrial systole or contraction or atrial kick to push all the blood that is left inside the atrium inside the ventricle. Then it's time for a ventricle to go to contraction. Remember, this valve is open, this valve is open. These two valves still are closed because there is no reason to be open. When ventricle goes to contraction, blood should go back up inside the atrium, but you don't want that. As soon as ventricles start contracting, blood is going to come and push this valve up and close it. This is the atrium, this is the ventricle. And as a result, the valve is going to get shut and closed. As you can see in this picture, again my 4 valves are closed. Why these 2 valves close again? Because when blood is trying to go back inside the atrium, look at the shape of this valve. Look at the shape of the valve. Blood is going to fill this cusp, and because of the shape of this valve, blood is going to fill this cusp and push it up and close it, just like this one. So therefore, all 4 valves are closed. Now, ventricle keep contracting. During this time that ventricle is under contraction, but blood inside the ventricle has nowhere to go because all 4 valves are closed, we call this stage isovolumic contraction. Isovolumic contraction is when the ventricle is in contraction but the volume is not changing. However, if you keep pushing it, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to exceed the pressure inside the artery, or in this side, the pressure inside the left ventricle is going to exceed the pressure inside the aorta, and as a result, valve is going to open. Now blood is going to get out. When blood gets out, this is called rapid ventricular ejection. Quickly, blood is going to leave the ventricle, is going to come inside the vessels, inside the pulmonary artery or aorta. As a result, pressure inside the aorta or pulmonary artery is going to go up. But this ventricle is still under contraction. At one point, the contraction of ventricle ends and starts relaxing, and now since the pressure inside the vessels, inside the aorta or pulmonary artery is very high, blood wants to come back again. But as soon as blood tries to come back, blood is going to hit these valves. Pulmonary valve or aortic valve is going to close it. Look at the shape of the cusp. Again, blood is going to close it. As you can see here in this picture, this arrow shows blood trying to come back and is going to shut the valve and close it. Now the ventricle is under relaxation. During the time that ventricle is relaxing, the atrium is going to start filling, and that's going to bring us to the very beginning of this cycle. You must realize when the ventricle is under contraction, not all blood inside the ventricle is going to empty inside the vessel. You will see that every time we pump this blood out, 2/3 is going to get pumped out and 1/3 is going to stay inside the heart. In other words, you never have any situation that inside the heart is empty. There's always blood inside. So when the ventricle goes to relaxation, do we have blood inside the ventricle? Yes, because we didn't pump all the blood out. As ventricle is not relaxing, we call this a stage isovolumic relaxation because this ventricle is relaxing and the volume is the same. Blood keep coming inside the atrium. When the pressure here is going to exceed here, this valve is going to open, and the rest of the story. A couple of more terms, although we're going to cover those terms later, but I want you to know. One is, after all blood comes inside the ventricle and ventricle start contracting and these valves close, the amount of blood that we have here is called end diastolic volume, because that's the maximum amount of blood that you have inside the ventricle. It's called end diastolic volume. Is the volume at the end of diastole. After heart is going to pump this blood out, what is left inside the ventricle is called end systolic volume. End systolic volume is what is left after you pump the blood out. Let's say you have 120 ml of the blood inside the heart. That is called end diastolic volume. And you pump around 80 ml out. So 40 ml left inside the ventricle. That's called end systolic volume. Preload is another name for end diastolic volume. So that's a very quick review of anatomy. Now let's go to physiology. We can plot all this cardiac cycle in a curve just like this. It seems like very complicated, but in reality it's really simple if you follow me through. This part is going to show different event of the heart. The vertical line shows the pressure. The horizontal line shows the time. So here's my time and here's my pressure. This purple line shows the event inside the left ventricle, and this dashes is going to show the pressure inside the left atrium. This green dashes line shows the pressure inside the aorta. What you see here is going to be only the left side of the heart, which is the same for the right side of the heart. So let's focus on this point, and when the atrium is going to go to contraction. When atrium is going to go to contraction, let's follow the purple one. When the atrium goes to contraction, blood is going to come inside the ventricle. As a result, the pressure inside the ventricle slightly is going to go up. Because remember, as you add blood inside the ventricle, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to go up. Remember, still, your ventricle is relaxing. Your pressure is going to go up because atrium contracted and increased the pressure inside the ventricle. When the contraction ventricle ends, all of a sudden pressure inside the ventricle is going to drop. At this point, ventricle starts contracting. As soon as the ventricle goes to contraction, your mitral valve is going to close. The pressure inside the ventricle keeps going up and up and up and up until the pressure inside the left ventricle exceeds the pressure inside the aorta. As a result, aortic valve opens right here. Blood is going to eject out quickly. The contraction of the ventricle ends here, and now this ventricle starts relaxing. When the ventricle starts relaxing, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to go down. And as soon as the pressure inside the ventricle is going to go down, blood trying to come back inside the ventricle, from aorta back to ventricle, and that is going to shut the valve and close the aortic valve. Pressure inside the ventricle keep dropping. That means left ventricle is going to go to relaxation and relaxation and relaxation until the pressure inside the ventricle is lower than the pressure inside the atrium. As a result, mitral valve opens. When the mitral valve opens, blood is going to come to the ventricle, but the pressure is not increasing that much. It's almost plateau. Remember, ventricle is still relaxing. And at this moment, again, the atrium is going to go to contraction. So the pressure inside the ventricle is going to bump up. And again, when the contraction ends, the pressure is going to drop again. And the rest of the story that I just mentioned. So let's repeat this one more time. Here, the atrium is going to go to contraction. Therefore, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to increase. Imagine that here's the atrium. When the atrium is going to go to contraction, obviously pressure inside the ventricle is going to go up also. So pressure inside the ventricle, this purple one, is going to go up. As soon as the contraction of the atrium ends, then the pressure inside the ventricle is going to drop too. As a result, there's a drop. Now ventricle is going to go to contraction. As soon as ventricle is going to go to contraction, we don't want blood goes back up inside the atrium. As a result, the mitral valve must close. Pressure inside the ventricle goes up and up and up. This B column from here to here is called isovolumic contraction because the volume is stay the same and the blood is going nowhere, but the ventricle is under contraction. As soon as the pressure inside the ventricle exceeds the pressure inside the aorta, aortic valve open and blood is going to eject out. As blood is ejecting out, still the ventricle is under contraction. As you can see, the pressure inside the ventricle still is going up. So still the ventricle is pushing to push this blood out. At the end of this peak, around here, contraction ends and the ventricle starts relaxing. At one point, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to be less than the pressure inside the aorta. So blood wants to come back again. As soon as blood trying to come back, aortic valve is going to close. So this is called ejection phase. Aortic valve closes, the pressure inside the ventricle is going to drop. Remember, not all blood is going to leave the ventricle. Around 40 to 60 ml blood is going to stay inside the ventricle. This is called isovolumic relaxation. When the pressure inside the ventricle is even lower than atrium, mitral valves open and the blood is going to come inside the ventricle. Since ventricle still is relaxing, so it's going to accommodate for this blood to come, so pressure is not going to go that much up. But as soon as the atrium is going to go to contraction right here, pressure is going to go up. So here's the mitral valve closes, here aortic valve opens, aortic valve closes, mitral valve opens.